Hi, I'm David with EV World News. We're talking about electric vehicles, green energy, and the stock markets. Today, I've got founder and chief editor Bill Moore with us. How's it going, Bill?
Going good, thank you very much. We had some thunderstorms this morning, but it's clearing off now, and hopefully, our fingers crossed, we don't have a repeat of last week.
I saw yesterday they dug some people. So the tornado was Friday, right? Wasn't it Friday?
Yep.
Yeah, they dug some people out in Elkhorn, found people alive just yesterday.
No, I hadn't seen that.
Yeah. So I thought, wow,
Well, you heard about the two brothers that got sucked out of their house, right?
no.
Oh, you didn't? Oh, there's a story.
Yeah, it doesn't sound
and their
good.
two dogs.
Did they survive?
Yeah, amazingly, they're all cut up, and the one guy required, I think, something like 32 stitches. Yeah, they got rolled. They got sucked and rolled by that. Well, we think it's an F3 that came through Elkhorn. So
Yeah, I mean, we sure had the sirens, if nothing else, down here. Anyways, let's start out today. We're going to talk a little bit about somebody we don't ever have pop up in the EV space very often, but they're a big dog in the car business. That's Honda. So Honda just announced they're building an $11 billion electric vehicle hub in Canada. It's going to be in Ontario and create a comprehensive EV value chain. New assembly and battery plants, as well as other facilities, support production of all electric and fuel cell powered vehicles.
Oh, fuel cell. Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, that term crept in there. Many automakers have announced pullbacks in their all EV plans amid slower than expected adoption of EVs. The ones that keep announcing the plans, though, aren't those US companies? Doesn't it mostly just tend to be like Ford, GM, and Stellantis, and then the others keep upping their plans?
Well, that's a good question because you've got so many that are, you've got the guys at Rivian who were taken to task by Georgia politicians for supposedly reneging on their plan to build that factory down there. And of course, Rivian says, no, we haven't abandoned Georgia. We're still planning on building. We just have to weather the current, fiscal storm. So.
Right, I get it, but it's a challenge, to make all that happen, and they got to have the cash to do it. It's a challenge if you don't have the cash available, right?
Yeah, well, the cash available, and also the promise that there's a significant market to make a return on whatever money's invested, that they use from their outside sources. So,
yeah. Let's see. So Honda's saying that vehicle production in Canada will start in 2028 with annual vehicle capacity of about 240,000 units once it's fully operational. Their investment is in Alliston, Ontario. Honda's goal is to exclusively offer all electric and fuel cell powered vehicles by 2040. Let me see, expect to create 1,000 jobs. They already have 4,200 employees and it's 2 manufacturing facilities in Ontario. That's pretty good news, I think. I hadn't really seen much about Honda in a while. What was the last, because they've had an electric vehicle before, right?
Well, they've had
hybrids.
Multiple electric vehicles before, going back to the EV Plus back in the late 90s, early 2000 time frame. And then they've rolled, then came the big shift to hydrogen, and they started playing with a lot of, designs and developments around hydrogen. One of which I got to drive around LA. So they've been covering the bases. I think part of that is because the Japanese government has been so committed to, we want to be the leaders in hydrogen technology, in particular hydrogen powered vehicles. And so I think there's that pressure from the government to advance the technology. They did have a deal with GM for a while. I don't know if that's still an active arrangement to co-develop hydrogen fuel cell technology, but So yeah, it doesn't surprise me when you mentioned the fact that the new Ontario facility will produce fuel cells and battery electric vehicles. There's a place for fuel cells. I just don't know whether it's in the passenger vehicle space or whether it's in the more commercial space. So those things are still to be worked out, but it's encouraging.
I see it more in the commercial space, because the
Yeah.
one thing that EVs really haven't solved yet, because I hear arguments about so many things, everything about, charging time, all this other, but the real one they haven't been able to solve is towing. Now, with tractor trailers,
Yeah.
we've been able to get tractor trailers with a 400, 500-mile range. Okay, but normally interstate tractor trailer drivers could go 1,300 miles on a tank of fuel. But that being said, one of the issues is this, because a lot of your fueling stations are kind of in the middle of nowhere. Okay, and while you'd have to develop more electrical infrastructure to have, it's beyond a supercharger. I mean, you've got to have some kind of, multiple supercharging for every battery pack on that truck to fill up those trucks, and it's going to take a long time to get enough grid power, and even then you're still about 500 miles. I think fuel cells make a lot of sense
What
in the
if
trucking industry.
Yeah, well, yeah, and of course but that being said, where does the hydrogen get generated? Because that is really, it's not like you can take and refine, gasoline and put it in a pipeline or put it on a tanker truck or in a rail car and, move it up. That has a far limited range of, unless of course you're talking about some cryogenic, tanker ship or something like that.
Mhm.
But it's difficult to transport. And so it makes sense, if you're going to be doing hydrogen, you should do it as close to the source as possible. I remember seeing one article where they talked about that if you were going to compress hydrogen and put it on a tanker like we do gasoline, and then you just move it from station to station to fill up each station's tank, like they do with gasoline or diesel fuel, that pretty much a lot of the energy that you're pushing, if you do the truck runs on hydrogen as well. Now they could run the truck on diesel or something else, but assuming that they decide to go all green, then the amount of energy that truck consumes moving around that hydrogen, a lot of that hydrogen just gets eaten up moving it around. So it doesn't make sense, so apparently it makes sense if, the closer you can get to the source or vice versa, the closer you can get to production to the usage case, then it seems to make sense. So it's not a slam dunk.
No, I get that. I get that. But, there's certain use cases that just seem like they may be better for it. I'm not excited about hydrogen in cars. And a lot of that is, EVs are a little more fun to drive. And we already have starting to have an infrastructure for EVs, even though people say it's not sufficient, and it is insufficient. But the fact that you can charge your EV at home makes a big difference.
Yeah.
That's why I'm saying I think there's, going to be some other, types of issues with it.
Yeah. Here's the other thing we don't tend to remember. Honda, of course, builds cars. But
Right.
you know what else they build? And motorcycles. But you know what else they build?
Boats.
No, they build airplanes.
Oh, okay.
So if you could come up with a hydrogen fueled, and that could be just burning it just like you would jet fuel, or instead you use that to power a fuel cell in the vehicle to spin a couple of propellers out on the cells at the back of the plane or wherever configuration makes sense, then you've got a ready market for their fuel cell technology.
Right. And we have somebody commenting about hydrogen and nuclear fusion for NASA. The only thing is, I don't think nuclear creates um, jet propulsion. And I think that's one of the challenges that I've heard is the problem is you have to expel gas to move rockets
Yeah,
in
well,
space.
not necessarily, because I came across some really interesting stuff on a website called APEC. And these are a
Mhm.
bunch of guys that get together on a monthly basis to talk about their advanced, for what I'm going to call a propulsion, but in the case of the guy here in Omaha, it's a traction.
Mhm.
There's some really interesting stuff going out there in the way of electrifying space travel. So you don't have to use old technologies to push a gas at, out the back of an exhaust nozzle. There's one that's called the Gravilifter. And basically it nobody, right, apart from the Russian guy that invented it, that it lifts. There's nothing there pushing it. It just lifts and it sits there. He went out, he's got a video out in a field where he's got the cables connected to it to provide power, but that thing is just sitting here, hovering above, no visible means of propulsion. It's all being done through some understanding that's over my head on electrical fields and quantum and all this stuff. And he, I don't know whether he's a magician. You know how the magician will take a hula hoop and run it through the body of, the pretty little model that he's floating right above the
Right.
ground. I don't know whether he's figured out that trick or whether, but he takes his hula hoop and he goes around it and drops over it. And pardon my French, but the damn thing's there floating, doing its thing. And then there's some others, a guy that's an engineer out of NASA and his team that have gotten a patent for their technology that uses electrostatic energy. There's the guy in Omaha that's created, it probably isn't what it is, but I'm going to call it a warp bubble that
Mhm.
can move things. So yeah, if we got to have something to generate that electricity, and I suppose, some form of compact nuclear energy could generate that power. So I don't know. I mean, we obviously we're not in the 25th century yet.
No, I used to have a friend who worked at Area 51,
Yeah,
and he was in security of all
yeah.
things. And he used to tell me, goes, I don't know what we were watching fly around. He said, I didn't understand any of it, but there was things flying around there that didn't make any sense how they were in the air,
Uh,
and
do we need to censor this part of the video?
I don't know. This was a long time
Are
ago.
we
It's
going to get a
probably,
list? Yeah.
yeah. So this would be from 30 years ago, but so there was things flying around that just didn't make any sense,
Well,
and that's just the way it is.
there are guys, who seem to be in the know who, think that
But you look at you.
we've had that technology for some time now and been working on reverse engineering it. So, and I'm not
No,
talking
I
about
know.
Bob Lazar. These are other guys
No,
apart from
no.
Bob Lazar. So,
Um, but I wanted. So you mentioned something about Rivian just a minute ago, how the state of Georgia is getting on them for not getting, things done, and
right.
they're short on cash, and you and I have discussed how certain EV makers maybe need help. But this one article here, this is about Xiaomi, and this is funny because they're a cell phone maker. They
Mm-hmm.
only released the Xiaomi SU7
SU7.
a
Yep.
month ago, and they've already built 10,000 units. Now,
1,000 of them.
that's not to say that they built 10,000 in the last 30 days. They already had some built, but the fact that they've only really been open and they've already produced this
Yeah.
many is
It's
really hard to fathom, because I don't know that Rivian produced 10,000 vehicles last year. I think they produced like 9,000 vehicles all of last year. And that probably includes what they sold to Amazon. And so you got to figure at least half of those were probably Amazon vans, and they've been making those for a few years. Because I know they've only delivered 13,500 Amazon
yeah.
vans out of 100,000 that are ordered. But I just thought that this was worth just mentioning. We don't need to really get into Xiaomi today,
Right.
but I just thought that, you mentioned that. It's like, well, that's a pretty big deal. So let's talk about what Tesla is doing in China. So Musk
Yeah.
flew over to China,
Yeah.
and
Surprise
he,
visit.
yes,
Landed in
and
Beijing.
he's
And
got a bid for China. Looks like he's trying to get full self-driving to go live in China before it goes live in the United States. They seem to be more receptive and open to it. And Tesla shares shot up 15%
yeah.
on this news. So this
Yep.
was a pretty big deal here to see that the stock went up on this news. It's interesting. If Musk is focused on Tesla, like people say, he can make magic happen. And a lot of people have felt he's been too distracted with Twitter and SpaceX and the Boring Company and the other things that Tesla
Insurance
or
company.
that Musk is involved in. Oh, has he been involved in an insurance company
Oh yeah,
too?
yeah. Tesla Insurance. Oh yeah, he's got an insurance company. Yeah.
Yeah, but anyways, they basically, if Tesla succeeds in bringing full self-driving to China, the U.S. electric car pioneer will be shifting into the fast lane of the global race towards autonomous vehicle. My understanding in China, there's several other companies
Yeah,
that are
there are.
trying to be number one there in
Yep.
this space as well. And so they've got some competition on this. And even in the United States, they've got competition from Ford and GM, because GM had the thing down
And
in
Mercedes.
Phoenix, and Mercedes.
Mercedes is the first car to officially approve for level 3 driving.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. They beat
I,
Tesla.
I think Tesla should have bought Mercedes back about 5, 6 years ago when they had, they were worth 10 times as much as Mercedes. And it really looked like they might acquire them. And I think it would have would have been a big help for both companies.
Well, interestingly, it was Daimler Chrysler that helped Tesla through one of its low points in the mid 20 teens. They came to the rescue and put some money in the company.
Um, but anyways, what do we got here? So Tesla could prove to be a fierce competitor in China's autonomous vehicle segment. Well, duh. I don't think that's a big shock to anybody. But rivals would be BYD and Hawaii. I'm never sure if I say that name right. They're not
Yeah.
allowed to sell in the United States. It could be Huawei. I think it's pronounced Hawaii almost, or very similar to the
Okay.
state.
Our Chinese listeners, please send us a way to pronounce that correctly. I've seen it because they were the ones that weren't they got banned because of their router?
It had to do with their phones. Their
Yeah.
phones were sending too much data back to China, was what the deal was. Let's see. I don't know. I suspect a lot of the stuff we export probably doing the same thing. We all know it's data gathering, and now EVs. We're going to get to some of the data stuff about Tesla here in a minute, and it's all about gathering data. It's a very interesting concept to see how they're going. Let me see other EV makers trying to do something that are also in the smartphone space. Let me see. 10 automakers and suppliers have unveiled driver assistance systems over the past 2 years that can navigate city streets and make turns at intersections. This includes Xpeng, Li Auto, and Xiaomi. I didn't know that Xiaomi was doing it too, but I guess that doesn't really surprise me.
Phone company, so.
But Xiaomi needs advanced driver assistance features to compete. Oh, well, we'll see where that ends up. But that was looking at an article from Reuters or Reuters. I can't pronounce anything. I get flamed all the time. It's fine. I don't know how to say anything. Apparently, we're just a bunch of dumb Nebraskans. Okay,
well,
reporting the EV world news.
Speak for yourself.
Yeah. You're not a dumb Nebraskan.
Well, it depends on who you talk to.
Right.
And what mood my wife is in. So
there you go. There you go. Yeah. But this is kind of interesting. Here's another perspective on this. This is from Benzinga. They're saying that the Tesla's FSD node seen as a move to smooth over the entry of Chinese EVs into the U.S. market.
Well, and that's one of my points, is that the reason China and the premier, I think it's the premier he met with, not with Xiaopeng, but with the other gentleman. The reason that they did that was so that they have a chess piece, whatever, in the move to finally get the U.S. approval to, come into the United States with their cars, which are. I mean, I saw a report that that in order to keep the Chinese at bay in the way of tariff, that the tariffs need to be on Chinese vehicles need to be increased another 55%. I mean, I guess what they're saying is, well, let's get them so that they're priced a little bit more than American cars. Even though over in China they can produce these things for a fraction of what they cost here. So, yeah, so that's a gambit. I think that's part of the reason why they did the deals, so it gives the Chinese government a bargaining point. Hey, we did this for Tesla, open up for us.
Well, I already see, we talked about that Volvo EX30 a few days ago. And it's coming in at $35,000 for a Volvo SUV that's all electric into the U.S. market. And they're figuring out how to skirt some of the regulations. They're still subject to the 27.5% tariff, but they're getting it refunded. We were talking about, and so it's interesting to see how that all is going to play out. I told you, one of the companies that I've done some consulting work for, they're bringing a $12,000 EV, and they started sharing photos today and showing where the status is of that. I mean, they're about to actually start bringing a low-speed $12,000 electric car into the U.S. And when you think about it, it's a different ball field. They're actually trying to target golf cart dealers to sell it, but it looks an awful lot like a Mini Cooper.
Yeah.
And, when you're in a market like where we're at, even, if you don't get on the interstates, the speed limits around here really aren't all that high.
Yeah, 45 maximum. And
yeah, so a 50 mile per hour car would be okay here.
Yeah, the laws for NEVs, neighborhood electric vehicles, our Chinese call them new energy vehicles. NEVs here are considered neighborhood electric vehicles. And the rules governing those is they can't go on streets more than 35 miles an hour. So that sort of presents a problem for a lot of our streets around Omaha, the major thoroughfares that you'd want to get on, besides driving back neighborhoods, are mostly 45. So
they're targeting East Coast cities where the speed limits don't exceed 35.
Right. Yeah, and that makes sense. And that's a lot of congestion back there, and they need vehicles like that. So yeah. Out here in the great wide open spaces of the Great Plains, maybe not so much.
Yeah. So let's get on to our big article for today. And this is on modern EV batteries rarely fail. And we see stuff all the time. I know EV batteries fail. Okay. I know people that have had warranty work done on their Teslas where they've had the batteries replaced.
Well, not the Tesla. I've had mine in the Honda, my Honda Insight, and my Prius.
And so those were in hybrid cars.
Yep.
So anyways, so before 2015, there was a lot of problems with EV batteries. And we're talking now 9 years ago. And there was fires and failures particularly in the Chevy Bolt and the Nissan Leaf. Okay. And so the statistics are going to be kind of surprising as we get to some of them. Oh, there's one of those videos just running in the background.
Yeah.
Anyways, EV battery replacements due to failure from 2011 to 23. And this is as a percentage of EV batteries on the road. So in 2011, 7.5%. So that's what, 1 in 13, I think, about 1 in 13, failed in 2011. Then it starts going down quite a bit from there, 3.6%, 4.4%, 3.9%. But then, 1.6. And all of a sudden, in 2016, it drops to about 1 in 300 EVs had a battery failure. And then it drops to 1 in 1,000 in 2017. It went back up again a little bit, but it's back in 23. It was back to 1 in 1,000. Now, these are from that model year. Okay. So that is a pretty big change in how the failures have gone.
Now, is that, of course, somebody's going to come back and say, well, that's only for 1 year, and you got to get 10 years, life and service out of these things to see what it really is. So, the one furthest back is the one that has the most failure. So, I guess I sort of I'm excited about it. I'm very pleased with it. I just know how somebody's going to come in and make that point.
Well, and they could, but then I guess you go and you buy a 2017 and 2020 model years.
Right. Yeah.
If that would be your theory. And it's, we were showing that Tesla Model 3 that hit 300,000 miles on the first battery and only used it was only on its fourth set of tires.
Yeah.
And we keep mentioning the tires. That's 75,000 miles. They didn't wear out in 4,000 miles like that one article claimed.
Right.
But that was from a 2020 model. But here's a list of cars that were really bad. And the 2013 Tesla Model S had an 8.5% failure rate. That was pretty bad. The 14 Model S, 7.3. The 15 Model S, 3.5. Now, not many people own a Model S. Currently that's only 5% of Tesla sales or 4% of Tesla sales.
No.
So it's not really the big mover, but these are, from a long time ago. The most recent one of these is 8 years ago in 2015. The 2011 Nissan Leaf had an 8.3% failure rate. Well, how many of those are people out buying now? 2012 had a 3.5, and then numbers change. This data is coming from Recurrent. How common is an EV battery replacement? Let's see here. Chevy Bolt, 34% official battery recalls.
Yeah,
Hyundai Kona. Now, Kona coincidentally has a completely new model for 24, and it's hitting the market supposedly at $26,000.
Mm-hmm.
So they're about to do a price drop here in the U.S. to $26,000. I don't know if any of these $26,000 ones are available yet, but that is the plan with them. But if you look, we got the Nissan Leaf. That's about 5% battery recalls. The Bolt EUV, the Tesla Model S, and then we got Jaguar I-Pace. Then we started getting down to like a couple percent. Audi e-trons at 1%, and the Model 3 and the Model Y are at like 0.5%.
Yeah. It's interesting. I had here in Omaha last weekend, the day after the tornadoes, we had Earth Day, and we had a record number of EVs show up. About half of them brought by the local dealers. So I got to see the new Mercedes EQS and
Nice.
the BMW, Mini Aceman, Kia. We actually had 3 Kias show EV6s. Were they? Yeah. No. They were Subaru Solterras, which I did not realize were actually even for sale yet. Shows you how far behind the curve I am.
That's the Toyota Busy Forks. The Solterra and the Busy Forks are the same car.
There were 3 of them there. One brought by a dealer, 2 brought by owners, and the one owner, last one who showed up, was a little nurse who's about 4'11", retired visiting nurse, driving up in this fancy red Solterra. It was so cute. In fact, I got some photographs I took of her. So we had more, in previous years, we basically relied on local Sierra Club members and me to bring our car and show them off. Well, this year we had dealers start to participate in it, and
Nice.
it was exciting to see all those. But we of course also had people, which we wanted people from the visiting the Earth Day exhibits, the people doing bicycles and belly dances and those things. And, guys coming up and starting, I'm not into EVs. I don't think they work. Yeah. So you're getting into those kind of discussions, right? And what's interesting is that many of the arguments that I've been using for the last decade in talking to the Onyx. Now, Onyx is a local dealer who represents, Jaguar and Audi and, basically the luxury brands.
BMW and Mini.
Yeah, he represents those, and it was interesting. He's talking about, well, how you doing with customers, and what are they saying, and the same arguments that he's using were the ones I've been talking about for 10 years. So it's exciting to see that begin to happen. They're not flowing off the lot here. You got people who just can't, they can't at this point in their lives. They just aren't ready to make that change. But it is encouraging to see their willingness now to participate in things like Earth Day. So I found that very encouraging.
Yeah, I'm starting to see F-150 Lightnings and a few other EVs. Seeing a lot more Mach-E's riding around in Omaha.
We actually had a Mach-E show up for the show. Union Pacific Railroad, which of course is headquartered here in Omaha, brought their Ford F-150 Lightning Pro. And I didn't realize that there's a difference, because then the Ford dealer, Woodhouse Ford, thank you, Woodhouse, brought their F-150. But I said, well, it looks a little different. The grill isn't quite the same. It's just slightly different models, but it's the same vehicle. Man, and the guy from the UP person, I asked him, well, what do you think? He says, was it that or the Ford dealer? I can't remember that. But one of them said, that truck is the fastest car on our lot. A pickup truck, the fastest car on the lot.
Oh yeah, it's funny. That's why I don't think hydrogen will catch up the same way, because hydrogen cars are actually slower than gas cars. And I think that's one of the exciting things about EVs is
there are reasons why you have to have a battery pack in a fuel cell car for, we think, well, they'll run on fuel cell. No, there's a lag time that takes place in that chemical reaction inside that fuel cell that is not the same as pushing your foot on an accelerator for either an electric, particularly, or for a gasoline car. So to overcome that, they have to put a battery pack in there. So basically, a fuel cell car is a plug-in hybrid. So anyway.
Years ago, when I moved to Memphis, I went for a week visit before I took the job, and I borrowed the guy who was interviewing me. I actually stayed at his house and borrowed his car, and he had I think it was like a Mercedes 280D turbo diesel. No, I don't think it was a turbo. It was just a really old diesel, and he had worked. He had been a professional tennis player, and after he came off tour, he went to work for Mercedes for a while. And he'd gotten I don't know if he had bought, but I think he may have bought the Mercedes while he was still on tour. But anyways, it was the slowest accelerating car I've ever driven. Yeah. It took forever for power to go from that pedal to, hey, let's start going down the road. He warned me, though, goes, don't go pulling into traffic. It doesn't drive like other cars, or something like that. And it was definitely an experience, but I kind of imagine hydrogen being kind of similar. But I'm sure it's got to be a little better. But I've heard just horrible reviews by people, saying that like the Mirai is like the least fun vehicle possible to drive. And, who knows? Yeah. So you mentioned you got to see one of the new Mini Coopers. I had that on my list today, and we'll cover it just real quick. I used to have just a regular base model Mini Cooper. I'd gotten it for one of my kids, and it was so much fun to drive. And it really was like driving a go-kart to a certain extent, except much faster. And this is the Mini Cooper Aceman crossover SUV. And it says uses space in a compact electric crossover. It was really bizarre how large it felt inside the Mini Cooper,
Inside of it, yeah.
because the car was so small, but it never seemed cramped up,
It's
at
like
least
a
not in the front
it's like
seat.
a TARDIS,
Yeah,
right? You familiar with Doctor Who and the TARDIS?
not so
It's a
much.
blue police phone box inside, and it's a
Hmm.
supersized stadium. I'm sorry, outside is a phone box, right?
Hmm.
Inside, it's limitless in its space. So it's a British TARDIS.
Yeah, I would have been curious to test drive one of the new electric minis just to see if it has the same
There,
kind of experience.
go down to
You,
Onyx, and I'm sure they'll be happy to
oh, I know.
drive it. Yeah.
It's nice looking interior there, though. And this is kind of a traditional looking controls for a Mini Cooper.
For a video, particularly, yeah, for a digital display, yeah.
Yeah, but this is how their analog display always looked too. So they kind of kept it the same. But this is one of the things I see people saying they don't um, notice EVs. And other than the Teslas and the Rivians, you really, you and I both know that the grills look different, right? But
Yeah.
if you're beside an EV that's not a Tesla or a Rivian, you don't realize you're beside an EV. I mean, it's not like there's something mysteriously different other than the car is really quiet. Otherwise,
It goes like a bat out of hell when you leave this traffic stoplight.
right, it just isn't any different. But I think they're nice looking. The one thing this article didn't really get into was pricing, or it says it'll charge 10 to 80% in 30 minutes. And it's weird because most people use the 20 to 80. The 20 to 80 is probably a little quicker, but that's not particularly fast charging EV. I don't think they have a very long range. And this particular article did not really give.
Yeah, well, that's one of my frustrations
Oh, here we
with.
go. 252 miles. That's actually a lot more because the base Mini Cooper electric is only like 130 or something like that, or 150. Or maybe it was just 100. The Mini Cooper electrics before this one, yeah, there we go, 252 miles. And then it expresses luggage compartment can expand from 300 to over 1,000 liters. What does that even mean?
Yeah, exactly.
What does that even mean? We're not going to fill it up with milk. Um, yeah. So, anyways, I just thought that was interesting. So
No,
one of the
that's a reference that means something to somebody. But then when you think about it, what's a cubic yard?
right, right,
Okay.
I get it.
Yeah.
It's still it's hard to know what some of that is.
It would be
So
interesting to measure an interior of a trunk of a car in terms of cubic yards.
yeah, so we've been hearing a lot about how Tesla isn't doing well this first quarter, and BYD hasn't as well. But I wanted to bring this Reuters article up just because it's not necessarily about EVs, but it's saying Mercedes-Benz to stay firm on pricing following quarter one profit drop. And they vowed to steer clear of entering a discount race, saying it would defend its high prices for its luxury cars as model changeovers and supply chain bottlenecks cause quarterly profits to fall. And they took a 30% first quarter drop. That's a pretty big drop in
Yeah.
profitability for the company. I only brought that up simply because we're hearing so much about how all these EV companies are, not doing great. And a lot of it is these EV companies, a lot of them are competing for a lot of the same luxury buyers too,
Mhm.
as Mercedes is. And so my next article is on this very topic. Tesla China rival BYD says profits and sales fall. I'm not really sure about how genuine this article is. And the reason I'm saying this is so BYD has seen profits fall as it hits slowing demand for electric vehicles and a price war in the world's largest car market. It only made 630 million in profit in the first 3 months of the year. That's what, about $8-9 million a day profit. It sounds terrible, but BYD has been competing with Tesla to be the world's biggest seller of EVs. The US giant reclaimed the title earlier this month of losing out to Chinese rival at the end of last year. BYD sold over 300,000 battery-only cars in the first 3 months of the year, down from 526,000 in the last quarter of 23. I don't know that comparing first quarter of the year to fourth quarter of the prior year is really a fair comparison. I don't know what it did compared to the first quarter of 23. So, the time period of the year definitely matters. Now, BYD's financial results suggest it may be performing better than Tesla, which posted its first quarterly revenue fall since the pandemic disrupted production and sales in 2020. Let's see. And the company, which is backed by veteran U.S. investor Warren Buffett's Berkshire Hathaway, has cut prices on some of its latest models to attract buyers who have been more cautious when it comes to big ticket items such as cars. I'm not sure how, like I said, I'm not sure how honest those numbers are when they're comparing it to just one specific quarter versus, comparing it to, I think year over year, versus the same period the prior year is a better approximation.
Yeah, true. The problem is, of course, the media is, driven by, like what do we say? The stock market is driven by quarterly reports,
right?
And the media is probably driven by daily or hourly reports. So,
how do you capture people's attention, right?
Yeah.
Well, and we deal with the same thing. Even when we do this, I try to come up with headlines that'll get people to watch the episodes. I mean,
Yep.
It's a challenge. I look for articles I think will be interesting to people other than just Bill and I, and so we'll see where that goes. So this next article is about how Tesla wants to turn cars into Amazon Web Services on wheels. And so what they want to do is they want to use your unused power in your Tesla when it's sitting in your garage and the car's not running. They want to use this kind of like Amazon Web Services and use each of the cars basically as a server, helping store data and move data. This would kind of make sense in the blockchain space.
That's it. Yeah.
I can see it in the blockchain space. I don't know about in just a regular server space.
Well, how their cars are rolling computers anyway. So
right.
So why not tap some of that processing? If it's not having to be keeping track of pedestrians and bicyclists and dogs and cats and cars and trucks, as it's driving along, that's a lot of processing power. As it sits there for 8 to 10 hours a day or longer, I think the average car is on the road for something like 23 hours or parked for 23 hours in a day.
Right.
Why
not?
That
makes sense.
Why not figure out a way to tap that processing power? Because obviously we need, one of the biggest arguments against AI is the fact that it is as hungry, if not hungrier, than cryptocurrency in energy consumption. So if you can maybe figure out a way to move that over to something besides the big server farms, where you've got distributed little mini server farms, that might make sense. And particularly if they somehow allow the owner to get remuneration, because I don't think taxing the GPU or the CPU on these cars is going to be as possibly degrading the value of the car as if you were pulling it via energy out of the car in a vehicle to grid or vehicle to load type situation.
Well, Tesla's explaining it as being similar to, in their data centers, they'd be training the AI model, and the cars would be looking up specific tasks that people put in a query. So the cars would run the queries.
Yeah.
And the inference is done locally on every autopilot equipped Tesla on the road today, enabling the cars to understand the training data make informed decisions on how to brake, steer, and accelerate. So as long as those surroundings match what the model trains the car to look for. The big idea is that Teslas around the world equipped with certain hardware features can be used as a distributed cluster of computing resources to run inference tasks, essentially using the resources found in the car computer to run an AI model that Tesla has already trained.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. To put the, let me see here. To put that amount of power into perspective, it's essentially the equivalent of shoving an oversized power supply in a modern gaming computer with NVIDIA's top-of-the-line 4090 graphics card and leaving some power headroom to spare. So for Tesla, it's a win-win. The biggest plus being it won't cost them a dime to build out or maintain the hardware.
No, exactly.
Yeah, the capital expenses are shared by the entire world.
That I find even more, I think, potentially powerful than vehicle to grid. If you're doing data processing in your car, wow. Yeah.
Well, you've got the data processing, then you've got, obviously, we talked about autopilot, and we talked about how they're in the energy storage business, and people don't seem to value that at anything in terms of the company. But it's fascinating to see where some of this is going.
That's where they're making money right now.
Right.
In the data, it is in the energy storage side.
So just real quick, I've got this article from CNBC. India confident new EV policy measures will allow more foreign players to enter the market. New electric vehicle policy measures will open up the market to more global players. It involves concessional tariffs for limited volumes of imports by global EV manufacturers, linked to ironclad commitment by them to invest in India a minimum of $500 million. Much of the buzz has been around Tesla. The initiatives will also attract other foreign automakers, highlighting that Vietnam's VinFast has already announced its intent. I think VinFast is going to become a real player at some point. I think they're going to become a big player in the U.S. space, simply because of that VF3 coming to the U.S. in the next year or so.
Yeah, that'd be. When I think of Vietnam, I have never been to Vietnam. I was able to successfully avoid. It wasn't bone spurs, but I was able to successfully avoid having to get drafted because I was in college and things like that. And so I have a conception of what Vietnam is like that is based on the Vietnam War era, And I saw a photograph recently of Ho Chi Minh City. I said that's still the name of the capital, and it's like, good grief, skyscrapers, and it looks like a modern version of Los Angeles or Denver or name a city, Dubai. It's just amazing. So in a way, and I hate to put it this way, but would VinFast be the revenge of the Viet Cong?
You never know. They're planning to build 150,000 vehicles annually in India and Tamil Nadu. So they're investing $500 million over 5 years. They broke ground on the facility in February, so just 2 months ago.
Yep. Well, that should be a good market for them, especially because it's a relatively close market. It's not like having to ship things all the way across the Pacific and offload them on a boxcar or a train or whatever and send them to the Midwest or East Coast. So I don't know. What's the status of the Panama Canal right now? We still have that drought problem going?
I have no idea.
Yeah.
I haven't.
Because
is there a problem? Is it getting too low?
Well, they've had such a drought that the lakes that they use to fill the canal with the locks with are getting low, and so they're having to reduce the number of passage of ships just to keep up with the water. And so Mexico has proposed an alternative, building one basically across its southern border territory to replace that, because the canal was built in Teddy Roosevelt's era, for crying out loud.
Hard to fathom, isn't it?
Yeah, and so it's limited in the number of size of ships it can carry. Um, and of course, nobody wants to sail around, uh, the Cape Horn. So
That
that,
makes sense. It
yeah,
makes sense.
yep.
It wouldn't be good for Panama if Mexico did that because people would just really start diverting there.
Yeah, well, yeah.
But
I mean, that's a major, major source of revenue for them. So I don't. I think we probably have some commitment there still, but I don't. Probably in terms of managing the canal, but the rest of that area I think is pretty well all Panamanian territory now.
yeah, let's see. So India is looking to have 30% of car sales to be EVs by 2030. So it'd be
That's
interesting to see.
ambitious.
Yeah, yeah. Currently they're at 4%.
Yeah, well, and God knows they need it because if you look at the air quality in Mumbai and Calcutta, what we used to call Calcutta, and a lot of those cities, I mean, the air quality there is just terrible. So if a lot of that's coming from their diesel trucks and their diesel buses, and their the motor scooters and motorcycles, all of which are either two stroke or whatever. So they could really use that transformation that an EV will bring them, just to improve the quality of the life of the people there.
Well, it's good on India. We still haven't heard for sure if Tesla, did we ever get confirmation that they're putting that $3 billion
Okay,
into?
well, yeah, that was part of the surprise, because Musk was supposed to go to India to meet with Modi, and instead of going there, he goes to China and meets with the Chinese premier. So, was that a slap in the face of
Hmm,
the Indian government and Modi, or because they have some certain the Indian government's been playing hardball. So I think
right.
Elon is probably playing a little hardball back. But
Interesting.
I'm not privy to those conversations. So just an
Just
outsider,
speculation.
looking in. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Bill, we've gone over time today. So
Again,
anyway, yeah. Well,
what's good?
anyways, folks, we appreciate everybody who's been listening live.
Thank you for
And
your patience, folks. Thank
yes, yeah, no, we love having all these people watching every day. Anyways, I'm going to go ahead and end the stream, and
you.
we'll be back with Bill on Thursday.